Welcome to Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt of the Marquardt Law Firm at marquardtlawfirm.com.
We're thrilled to welcome Taylor Richard, Area Vice President of Sales for Heart Hospice, to talk about the highs, the lows, the myths, and the questions you might be afraid to ask about hospice. Taylor has a bachelor's of science degree in allied health, an MBA in healthcare management, and years of experience in businesses helping seniors, the elderly, and those suffering from illness and disability. Before we dive into the myths about hospice, tell us how you became so passionate about it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here this morning. So initially, I started working in senior living for my career. Spent a couple of years working in a hospital prior to my full-time career in senior living. And working in senior living, you are exposed to hospice all of the time. I worked for a wonderful organization that offered all levels of care. So we had everything from independent living all the way to skilled nursing. And whenever people move into independent living or even assisted living, they're not thinking about hospice, but it should always be part of the conversation because you're only going to continue getting older and in turn a little bit weaker and a little bit sicker most of the time. And it's just so hard if you haven't had that conversation previously to just introduce it when the time is right. So I would always start that earlier hospice conversation with my residents. And then additionally to that, one of my very best friends, she battled cancer from the age of 15 until we were 22, eventually going on hospice services. And so it was a very tough situation before she passed, but hospice allowed her to make final trips that she wanted to do free of pain or minimizing her pain throughout her last days.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
Well, this is Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Taylor Richard, Area Vice President of Sales for Heart Hospice. Let's talk about some of the myths.
Yes, there are many.
Myth number 1, hospice means giving up hope.
Absolutely not. So we're just shifting hope and shifting the focus from maybe curative to supportive measures whenever someone comes onto hospice services. What does hope look like for you? Does that look like more time with your loved ones? Does that look like another trip to the beach? How can we make that hope be comfortable for you and supportive for you and your loved ones?
Great. Here's another one. Hospice is only for the last days or only for cancer patients.
Very common myth and misconception. I know even with some of my own family members that I've discussed hospice with, they think that somebody has gone to hospice and they're never coming back. And oh my gosh, they've already been there for 3 months. That seems like a long time for hospice. So the hospice benefit is actually intended for people with a life expectancy of 6 months or less if the disease runs its normal prognosis and is not seeking curative measures or curative treatment. So you may have somebody that has end-stage renal failure and they don't want to continue to go to dialysis 3, 4, or 5 days a week. They just want to live out their remaining days. They would be very appropriate for hospice services. You also have somebody like in the instance my friends or in senior living and memory cares where someone's living with an Alzheimer's diagnosis or dementia diagnosis. We know there's no cure for that. We know that that resident or patient's going to continue to decline. So let's get them that additional hospice services ahead of a couple of days of their passing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How about hospice is a place you go to?
Another big myth. I know we hear it all the time, especially in the San Antonio area right now, in a couple of different markets, but especially in our Houston and then Fort Worth, Dallas area and San Antonio, we actually have an inpatient hospice house. So most people think about hospice as inpatient hospice, like in the movies. You go to hospice, you never come back, you pass away there. It's so different. So hospice is actually a service that is offered wherever somebody calls home. And with that, it may be in their RV in their campground, it may be in their physical house, it may be in the hospital or hospice house setting. And so depending on the patient's level of care and care need is where we offer that support and care. Okay.
Well, we are live on the air in Houston on 1070 AM and 103.3 FM. If you're listening right now in Houston and you have questions about hospice that you want answers to right now from Taylor Richard, give us a call at 210-308-8867, 210-308-8867. We're going through hospice myths, and the next one is hospice hastens death. They just give morphine to speed things up.
That is very true. Depending on,
It's
very
not
true that it's a myth. It is not true. It's very true that people think that. So, we are, depending on someone's beliefs, we don't have the world in our hands. We don't get to play Jesus or God, and we never know when a patient's last day is going to be. The point of hospice is to introduce comfort into the patient and help them not live in pain, whatever that looks like. And so hospice is not there to speed anything up. There's no, the dosages of medicines that we give are not going to speed up any type of passing. Even the types of medicines that we give don't do that. And so the intention is that we just help make that patient comfortable. The disease is going to run its normal course no matter what we do. So if we can instead have our nursing team, our social work team, our physicians, and spiritual care coordinators involved in that process, it can make their time that they do have left on earth much more comfortable for them.
Right, and there's regulations, and Texas policy doesn't support euthanasia, so that's not going to happen.
Absolutely. It will not. We are very well regulated, and we also work with hospice educated physicians as well as our nursing team and do ongoing education about what is appropriate, and truly what medication may work for pain management for one patient doesn't always work for others. And that being said, too, patients have the right to accept or refuse any sort of medication on their treatment plan that they want. So there's oftentimes that we work with patients that choose not to utilize morphine, even if it is appropriately prescribed for them, just because it's not something that they believe in. And so we absolutely shift our pain management strategies to what works for that patient and their loved ones.
Awesome. Okay, here's another myth about hospice. You have to stop seeing your regular doctors and give up all other treatment.
Another big myth. A lot of people think that whenever we get to hospice, it's like we're turning the water faucet off. All the medications stop, all the doctor's visits stop, and everything like that. And that's not the case. What we want to do is consolidate everything. We want to make it an easier process for our patients because most of the time when someone's on hospice, they don't want to go out to the ER for unmanaged pain and symptoms and things like that. So we do offer that support in home. However, all of that support is related to the patient's terminal diagnosis. They, if they would like to, can still go see specialists if it's unrelated to their terminal diagnosis as well. In addition to that, some of our patients actually choose, and this is for any hospice, but choose to keep their primary care physician as their attending physician. So you have the right when you're on hospice care to continue to be followed by your regular physician that you've been seeing. I know a lot of times with seniors, we see patients who have been seeing a doctor for 20 plus years and they don't want to switch to another doctor just because they're end of life. And so that physician, if they're in agreement, can continue to follow and be that attending physician as well through that hospice process.
Okay, that's very comforting. Like you said, they have a personal relationship with that person.
Yes.
Okay, here's another myth. We're talking about myths on Talk Law Radio, myths about hospice with Taylor Richard, who is area vice president of sales for Heart to Heart Hospice, which has offices in Dallas, Houston. Here in the San Antonio area. We actually span all the way across most of the eastern portion of Texas, as well as some additional states as well. That being said, something super special is we are still privately held by the same gentleman that founded us. So the area that I usually work with is all along our Hill Country corridor. Our offices in Temple, Austin, San Marcos, San Antonio, and Pearsall, but we have great team members spread throughout the state. Okay, so speaking of that, if somebody needs information or is curious and they call the main line, what should they expect?
Absolutely. So they should typically be expected to be connected to either our intake coordinator or one of our community education representatives. So those team members will connect with the person that's inquiring for information to understand a little bit more about what the need is. Do they just need general information on hospice care? Do they have a loved one in mind where they want to start that hospice conversation? From there, our team will set up a phone or in-person meeting, whatever works best for the caller, and get the information information that they need. And if they do decide that they want to move forward with hospice services, we'll talk them through what next steps look like as far as an evaluation and then admission to hospice services if appropriate.
Okay. Here's another myth. Hospice isn't covered. It's expensive, or you need a DNR first.
Big myth. So twofold there. As far as hospice not being covered or it's expensive, hospice is actually covered fully by both Medicare and Medicaid. The hospice benefit is something that patients have access to. It's also covered by most commercial insurances as well for hospice care. So when somebody is appropriate for hospice care and comes on service, typically they are not seeing anything out of pocket, especially as it relates to hospice care. And then as far as the DNR goes, most people think that if you're electing hospice, you have to have a do not resuscitate order in place. That is not true. We do want to make sure that your goals of care are aligned with that hospice philosophy and you're not seeking aggressive treatment, but you may not want a DNR in place because you want to make sure that you get to your daughter's wedding in December. You have some other things going on, or maybe you're still coming to terms with your diagnosis and you just need some time before you choose to implement a DNR. And that's absolutely okay. You shouldn't have to wait for hospice just because you don't have a DNR in place.
Right. They're not going to tell you what to do.
No, absolutely not. It's always the patient's choice.
Okay, well, this is Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Taylor Richard, Area Vice President of Sales with Heart Hospice, talking about myths about hospice. Stay tuned for the next segment because you're not going to want to miss what's going on in California. Before we go to break, though, I wanted to ask, why would somebody choose Heart Hospice over another hospice provider?
Very good question. And I definitely chose coming to work for Heart as opposed to other providers as well. But as I mentioned just a little bit ago, Heart is still privately held by the same gentleman, Kelly Mitchell, who founded us in 2003. So to me, that longevity of our team and leadership really speaks towards the organization and the care that we provide. Many of our staff are very tenured. I know just throughout my offices that I have the pleasure of working with, we have even aides that have been here for over 15 years, which is wonderful. We're also partnered with the Heart Hospice Foundation, and our Heart Hospice Foundation focuses on education to the community about kind of when hospice is appropriate, as well as support for specific diseases such as Alzheimer's care, but also focuses on supporting any of our patients' needs. So I know one thing that we see often in Texas is we have people who are in homes that maybe don't have working air conditioning, and it's 100 degrees here. That's not a safe or comfortable environment for someone to be in their last months of life. So our social work team actually works through grants with the foundation to do things like maybe put a window unit in to make sure their home's comfortable. So it's just wonderful and unique to us. There's a whole host of things with our inpatient unit as well, but could go on forever about that. Heart to Heart's very special.
Awesome. I can see the passion in your eyes. This is Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt here with Taylor Richard talking about hospice. Stay tuned. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about the sinners and the saints.
This has been Talk Law Radio with attorney Todd Marquardt, brought to you by the Marquardt Law Firm. You can learn more at marquardtlawfirm.com. And be sure to listen to the full Talk Law Radio show Saturday mornings at 11 on 9:30 a.m. The Answer.
Most families don't realize they have hidden legal blind spots until it's too late. Wills, trusts, Medicaid planning, even protecting a business. These are the kinds of issues attorney Todd Marquardt helps uncover before they become problems. Todd is the host of Talk Law Radio, where each week he guides listeners through the legal challenges families, veterans, and business owners face, while showing them the practical steps to protect what matters most. Catch Talk Law Radio, Saturdays at 11 a.m. on 9:30 a.m. The Answer, 6:30 a.m. The Word, and now in Houston on AM 1070 and 103.3 FM The Answer, or anytime on YouTube. Planning isn't just about documents. It's about peace of mind, security for loved ones, and building a legacy that lasts. Don't wait for a crisis. Do it before you die.